Yes, dear students, so today let us we study about the topic surface coatings. A substance applied to other materials to change the surface properties such as color, gloss, resistant to wear or chemical attack or permeability without changing the bulk properties are called surface coatings. Surface coatings include paints, drying oils, and varnishes, and even synthetic clear coatings and other products whose primary function is to protect the surface of an object from the environment. These products can also enhance the aesthetic appearance of an object. Most surface coatings are made up of synthetic polymers that form tough, flexible, adhesive films when applied to surfaces. The other component materials of surface coatings are pigments, which provide color, opacity, gloss, and other properties. Surface coating is mainly to improve its critical properties and to create a protective barrier against deterioration of the surface due to its reaction with its environment. Classification of coatings primarily fall into three categories, namely architectural, industrial, and spatial purposes. The most common generic surface coating types are epoxies, polyurethanes, polysiloxanes, and zinc-rich primers. Three proper metal finishing techniques are anodizing, powder coating, and electroplating. Surface coatings improves hardness and durability, rebuild surface, controls friction, adhesion, improves lubrication, corrosion resistance, and aesthetic. Types of surface modification methods are mechanical hardening of the surface, case hardening, thermal spraying, vapor deposition, electroplating, electroless plating, anodizing, and painting, etc. Now let us we know about the paints and the pigments. Paint is a pigmented liquid that, after application to a substrate in a thin layer, converts to a solid film. It is most commonly used to protect color or provide texture to objects. Paint can be purchased in many colors and in many different types, such as watercolor or synthetic. Most paints are either oil-based or water-based. Paint is used to decorate, protect, and prolong the life of natural and synthetic materials and act as a barrier against environmental conditions. Paints may be broadly classified into decorative paints and industrial paints. Decorative paints are applied to decorate and protect buildings and other objects. Industrial coatings are applied in factories to finish the manufactured goods like car, bus, two-wheelers, mopeds, and even various machines and the other materials. Let us we know about the constituent of a paint. The paint contains the following constituents. Number one, the pigment. This is used to impart color and opacity. The another one is binder. It is a polymer, that is a resin, forming a matrix to hold the pigments in place. Third one is an extender. These are the large pigment particles added to improve adhesion, strengthen the film and save binder. The fourth one is a solvent or thinner. This is either an organic solvent or water to reduce the viscosity of the paint for better application. Lastly, the additives. These are used to modify the properties of the liquid paint or dry film. These may include dispersants, silicones, dryers, anti-setting agents, bactericides, fungicides and algicides, and so on. The dispersants are used to separate and stabilize pigment particles. Silicones are used to improve weather resistance. Dryers are used to accelerate drying time. Anti-settling agents to prevent pigment setting. Bactericides are used to preserve water-based paints in the can. Fungicides and algicides are used to protect exterior paint films against molds, algae and lichen. Now let us know what are the formulations of the alkyd paint and emulsion paints or acrylic paints. Alkyd paints are generally used, they are all the water based, and the acrylic paints, alkyd paints are basically the solvent based, which are used for painting the doors and so on. This alkyd paint, the white glossy alkyd paint, it contains about 25% pigment, 30% binder, 40% solvent and 5% additives. Formulations of white matte emulsion, that is acrylic paint, contains 25% pigment, 14% binder, 12% extender and around 44% solvent and 5% additives. So these are generally used for the the walls. Now coming to the pigments used in paints. Pigments give color and opacity to paints. Amongst the organic pigments, particularly important are azo dyes, phthalocyanine and anthraquinone derivatives. The most common inorganic pigment is titanium dioxide, which is white and provide over 70% of total pigments used. It has a high refractive index and gives a gloss to the paint. Another widely used inorganic pigment is finely divided calcium carbonate. This has a low refractive index. It is mixed with titanium dioxide in a definite proportion to produce matte paints. Other pigments include iron oxides, which give black, yellow or red color, zinc oxide and also the carbon black. Pigments have corrosion inhibition properties are powdered zinc and zinc phosphate. Coming to the second component of the paint, that is the binders. Binders used in paints are the three most important are used modern paints, that is acrylic paints, the resins, alkyd paints and epoxy polymers. Acrylic polymers, these are the binder in many emulsion paints and it is based on homopolymers or copolymers of ethynyl ethanoate, that is vinyl acetate, and propanoate ester, that is nothing but acrylic esters. So the vinyl esters and acrylic esters. These paints are waterborne emulsion paints, which are better for environment than paint in which the binders are the organic solvents. These are used as a decorative paints, particularly for the inside and outside of buildings. Emulsion paints are made by the process known as emulsion polymerization, in which the liquid monomers to be polymerized are first dispersed in water as an emulsion. Acrylic resins may also be used in industrial paints either as waterborne emulsion paints or as solvent-borne paints. Solvent-borne industrial paints can have a tough protective finish and are widely used in industry as top coats, for example in car bodies and various other the two-wheeler and the other machinery bodies. The alkyd polymers, these are also the decorative gloss paints, typically contain a resin produced from glycerol with dibasic acid such as phthalic anhydride and drying oil such as linseed oil or soybean oil. On being heating together, the name alkyd is derived from alcohol and anhydride. During the formation of alkyd polymer, first glycerol reacts with drying oil to produce monoglyceride, which further reacts with anhydride to produce the polymer. Turpentine extracted from trees was used in the past as a solvent, but this time or recently this has been replaced by solvents from petrochemicals such as mixture of aliphatic and alicyclic hydrocarbons. Once the alkyd resin is applied, the pendant oil drying groups react with oxygen in the air to form a cross-linked hard thermoset coating with a high molecular mass. The third category is the epoxy polymers. Epoxy resins are made from 1-chloro-2,3-epoxy propane and substituted phenols. These are viscous liquids sold with high melting point and can be carried in solvents such as aromatic hydrocarbon, alcohol, ketones, esters, or as a dispersion in water as true emulsion. They are not normally used in top coats for outdoors because they are susceptible to UV degradation, but they make excellent interior coatings and exterior pigments. Epoxy resins are also used as adhesives, example like araldite and electrical insulators. Coming to the paint drying. As the paint dries, a film is formed which adheres to the surface of the material to which it is being applied. Emulsion paints dry by a physical process involving the evaporation of water followed by coalescence of the polymer droplets and their subsequent integration into a hard polymer matrix that acts as a binder for the pigment. On applying glass paints, the alkyd polymer cross-links by an oxidation reaction with oxygen in the air once the solvent has largely evaporated. The reaction is accelerated using salts of transition metals. Example, cobalt and manganese naphthalates, which catalyzes the cross-linking of the polymers chains, producing a hard surface film to the paint. Coming to the properties of an ideal paint. A typical properties of an ideal paint are ease of application, good flow out of application marks, forming a continuous protective film, high opacity, quick drying, corrosion resistance, water resistance, heat resistance, color stability, abrasion and scratch resistance, durability, flexibility, and easily cleaned. These are the properties of an ideal paint. Paints may be applied to the objects using brush, rollers, dipping, flow coating, spraying, hot spraying, electrostatic spraying, powder coating, etc. Let us know what is the difference between paint pigment and a dye. The main difference between a dye and a pigment is that dye molecules are very small, whereas pigments are much larger. Hence, dyes easily dissolve in water and other solvents, while pigments do not dissolve in water. Dye and pigments are two types of compounds which can impart a color to a material. This slide shows about the various types of surface coatings. Surface coatings are broadly classified into the three categories: the solution state, molten or semi-molten state, and third one is gaseous state. Solution state includes the sol gel, electrochemical deposition, and chemical solution deposition. Semi-molten state includes the welding, thermal spraying, and laser technique. Gaseous state includes IBAD, CVD, and PVD. CVD means chemical vapor deposition, PVD is physical vapor deposition. The surface properties of materials and parts. The methods of surface reinforcement include peening, surface alloying and hardening, coatings, sprayed coatings, vapor deposited coatings, cladded coatings, galvanic coatings, diffusion coatings, and so on. We also have metal cladding, which is nothing but the bimetal materials. This slide shows about the classification of surface coatings. This involves addition of new layer on metal substrate, that is application of coating or lining. A wide range of processes are used to deposit metal or ceramic, and organic coating methods commonly used are organic and ceramic coatings and lining, hot dip metallic coatings, electroplating, that is metal or composite coating, cladding means thick metal coating, thermal spraying, that is metal, plastic, ceramic or composite coatings, chemical vapor deposition, that is metals, graphite, diamond, the diamond like carbon, and ceramics deposition, Physical vapor deposition includes metals, ceramics, or solid lubricants. Thermoreactive deposition or diffusion process, where the carbide nitrides or the carbonitrides are generally used. This slide shows what is a paint. A paint is a solution or suspension of pigment, binder, and mineral solvent. A thin dry film so formed by this solution is then applied to a surface which is used as a decorative or protective coating. So the paints what we have shown, we are having a various colors. It may be a water soluble or it may be a organic solvent soluble. So this is also a slide which shows what is a paint and the composition of a paint. So the paint composition includes binder, solvent, pigment, and additives. This shows the types of paints. So that we have oil paints, enamel paints, emulsion paints, cement paints, aluminium paints, bituminous paints, plastic paints, anti-corrosive paints, graphite paints, and luminous paints. What are the characteristics of a good paint? If a paint is to have a good paint, it should dry quickly. It should form a tough, elastic, and durable coating. When dry, it should resist corrosion. Its surface should be glossy and washable. It should have necessary consistency and it should be easy to clean. This slide shows about the classification of paints. Paints can be classified under various factors that are on the basis of base used. So, depending upon the base that we use, the paints are classified as oil paints, alkyd paints, latex paints, and epoxy paints. Oil paints utilize a drying oil that oxidizes and hardens to form a tough elastic film when exposed to thin layer of air. Alkyd paints have as a binder an alkyd resin such as chemically modified soya or linseed oil. Latex paints have as a binder an acrylic resin that coalesces as water evaporates from the emulsion. Lastly, the epoxy paints have an epoxy resin as a binder for increased resistance to corrosion, abrasion, and chemicals. This slide shows a difference between acrylic resins versus alkyd resins. Acrylic resins are, most of them are water reducible, whereas alkyd resins are commonly called oil-based reduced with mineral spirits or paint thinner. Acrylic resins holds color and gloss better than oil-based products. Alkyd resins are harder than most acrylics. The acrylics are better flexibility of film for longer life and they are able to expand and contract with wood, whereas alkyd resins is oxidized from the environment and often will fade sooner than acrylics. Acrylic resins materials have a larger molecular particle size and material is thicker on the surface of improved durability. Alkyds are the best options for areas like decking surface where a harder finish is needed. like doors, windows, floors, where we use alkyd resins. Acrylic resins can have better adhesion to surface, whereas alkyd resins, they have better penetration into dense hardwoods than acrylates. This table shows the various types of the paintings. We can use a paint, we can apply a paint with the help of brushes, with the help of rollers, with the help of sprayings. And the another slide shows how these paints are used, what type of a paints they are used in industries. The industrial paints are slightly different from the paints used in the houses. Here also the shows the paints used in industrial purposes. So the nickel coatings are done and various coatings, the colored coatings, how it can be done in industries. So this is also the coatings. These are the utensils that are used in the homes. The spraying method is used, using brush is used. So this is how the painting is done. This slide shows what are paints and stains made of. Suppose for example, if you take a binder in the paint, it holds the coating together and it acts like a glue. The pigments present in paint, they provide color, UV protection and hiding to coatings. Additives present in the paint give coatings their unique properties. Resins in the paints, they may be either synthetic or vegetable materials that are used as a base for coatings. Solvents, it may be a water or mineral spirits present in the paint. They allow for the materials to be suspended, and once it evaporates from the coating, it allows for the film formation. This slide shows about the formulations of gloss and matte paints. The gloss paints, if you take a white gloss paint, this white gloss or alkyd paint, it contains 30% binder, 25% pigment, 5% additives and 40% solvent. If you take white matte emulsion paint, it contains 14% binder, 25% pigment, 12% extender, 5% additives and 44% solvent. So here in this slide I have shown the paints and the pigments having the different colors. So here also the pigments, they have a various different colors and how they are. It may be either a dye or it may be a pigment. Now the composition of the paint, as this diagram shows, it basically contains the binders and pigments. Binder is a polymeric substance and is either dissolved in the paint or suspended in it by emulsifiers. Hold the pigment to the surface. Drying oils, alkyd resins, vinyl and acrylic emulsions, they are the binders. Pigments give the paint its color and finish, protect the surface from corrosion and weathering. They hold the paint together. The components of the paint, this is also we have already studied. Coming to the component, one of the component is the binder. The binder exists to hold the pigment to the surface. The binder is a polymeric substance and it is either dissolved in the paint or suspended in it by emulsifiers. It hardens to produce paint film. Natural linseed oil is used generally, which set by oxidation on exposure to air. So the bind pigments together. The binder gives adhesion to surface. Binder provides resistance to water, chemical and abrasion. Binder determines performance and resistance characteristics of a paint. Here this side shows about once again the binders like drying oils, alkyd resins, vinyl and acrylic emulsions, epoxy resins, polyurethanes. Now the extenders that are present in the paint. These extenders are finely ground natural materials, mostly natural earths, which have no effect on the color of pigments or the color of paints, but may adjust certain of properties of the paint. Extenders may, for example, if you take, improve the ease of application of the paint, improve the adhesion of the paint to undercoat, give body to the paint, increase the hardness of the paint film. The thinners that are used in the paints. The solvent used as the carrier in paint includes water, water spirit. Water spirit is a mixture of the saturated aliphatic and alicyclic hydrocarbons. Xylene is a pure aromatic solvent having benzene ring structure in its molecule. Toluene is also used as a thinner with benzene. Alcohols like the normal butanol, isopropanol are organic compounds having a hydroxyl group bound to the carbon atoms of alkyl groups. These are also used as thinners. Ketones can also be used as a thinner in various paints. The additives present in the paints. Additives are chemicals added to paint, usually in small quantities to achieve special effects. Dryers, they accelerate the paint drying by catalyzing the oxidation of the binder. Plasticizers, they increase the paint's flexibility. Fungicides, biocides and insecticides prevent growth and attack of fungi, bacteria and insects. Flow control agents improve flow properties. These are all the various additives. How the painting is done. Before the painting, putty coat is done. Putties are generally used in the case of fresh painting or walls that require total overhauling just like fresh walls. They may not be used for repainting or touch-up exercises. Wall putty should be applied to walls after first primer coat has dried. It will fill in minor cracks and surface imperfections and provide a protective sublayer for the expensive paint. As per the requirement, 1 to 2 coats of putty can be applied, but it is required to allow the previous coat to dry before applying subsequent coats. The second is a primer coat. Generally, repainting services require a single coat of primer, but for fresh surface or the surfaces that need considerable leveling and removal of undulations, 2 primer coats are required. Care must be taken that the second primer coat be applied only after previous putty coat has dried completely. Third is a finish coat. Generally, 2 coats of finish coat are required to get the desired finish and color. It is important that each coat must be completely dry before the application of the next one. Lastly, let us use what are the uses of paints. The paint is used to protect material from weathering, oxidation process and damages by insects, to improve the beauty of material, to facilitate the cleaning process of surface, to give high-class finish, attractive colors and pleasing surfaces design and appearance, to protect various substances from corrosion, to make materials long-lasting. Paints can be used for materials made up of wood, steel, concrete and bricks. Students, go through these aspects and try to learn about the surface coatings, especially the paint. Thank you.